I've always had a fascination with coffee, not just the drink itself, but the entire process from start to finish. There was only one thing I really disliked about many big coffee brands. I knew they didn't get their beans fresh or by ethical means. I wanted to create something I could both take pride in and expand what coffee could be and how it tasted. It wasn't quick or easy, but I managed to start my own small export company as well as open a handful of stores where people could enjoy ethically sourced coffee beans, right here in Tanzania, near Mount Kilimanjaro. I was very picky about the beans that went into my coffee because I wanted them to always be at peak quality. That way, the taste wouldn't suffer. Small batch sizes and a strong focus on quality control helped make my company fairly popular, despite its small size. I don't dress like what some might expect a Western CEO to look like. I'm not wearing a suit and sitting in a fancy office while everyone else does the work. I'm in the office in regular working clothes, just like everybody else, and sometimes you'll even find me in the shops too. I don't agree with how certain companies and CEOs behave, so I have a policy about respect. I do expect my employees to show me a certain level of respect as their boss, but in return, I respect all of them back. It doesn't matter if someone is high up in the company or just part of the cleaning crew, every single person gets respected. In my country, respect is also very cultural, so I rarely run into any issues there. I'm upfront with how I expect people to behave in my company, and honestly, it works well. I've found that my employees feel relaxed and aren't nervous when they need to come to me with a problem or concern. I'm a boss who understands life and knows that unexpected things can happen, and I won't punish anyone for it. One place I can often be found is in the main office kitchen. I was able to secure a nice, modern building for my company and made sure to include a kitchen for 2 reasons. The first was so that everyone had a place to store and eat their food during breaks. The second reason was because I wanted a space where I could experiment with different tastes and infusions of coffee. I found that my own employees enjoy trying out new flavors and are honest with me about how they compare to our existing blends. Around that time, I'd been working with a marketing agency to launch a new campaign aimed at boosting awareness of my company and sales. I was told they would be sending someone to help, though no exact time was given, so I carried on with my day as usual, actually working on a new coffee blend, which I'll explain more in a moment. The person who arrived turned out to be a middle-aged expatriate woman, the kind of person you'd call a Karen in the West, so I'll refer to her that way here. She was an expat, which, I won't lie, worried me a little. I wanted to make sure the marketing would resonate well with locals, and since she wasn't from here, I wasn't sure if she could deliver that. Still, I knew this before she arrived, and the agency assured me she'd been living here long enough, and everything would be fine. I didn't know exactly when she came in, but as she got closer to the kitchen, I could already hear her complaining loudly, much louder than anyone else. Heads were probably turning the moment she walked through the door. She didn't greet a single person. Instead, she started walking around and criticizing everything. From what I later learned, someone even tried to greet her respectfully, but she complained about that too. I could hear her before she entered the kitchen, and I already didn't like what she was saying. "Stupid African ways of doing things," she muttered. "Wasting all this time. And the CEO doesn't even have an office? You'd think a coffee company would at least know how to do things right." I didn't greet Karen. Instead, I just continued watching and listening as she entered the kitchen and started walking around. "They call this a kitchen," she said. "All this stuff looks 1,000 years old, and the coffee's probably just dirt and water they scooped off the ground." Another member of staff greeted her, and she seemed annoyed just from someone being polite. "I better taste this slop before I go and find the idiot that runs this place," she said, then turned toward me. She must have noticed I was holding a traditional coffee pot and pouring it into a small cup to test the brew. She looked into the cup and looked horrified, as if I'd poured blood instead of coffee. She was very rude and immediately demanded I make her a cup of coffee, then launched into a long list of sweeteners and flavorings she wanted added, so many that I doubted she'd even be able to taste the coffee itself. By the way, Guys, for some reason that reminds me of a funny bit Conan O'Brien did with Jordan Schlansky, where he put whipped cream and instant hot chocolate into his coffee. I recommend checking that out on YouTube. Just search for Team Cocoa and Coffee. It's really funny. Anyway, aside from the fact that this wasn't a shop and we didn't have those kinds of ingredients in the office, we simply didn't prepare coffee the way she was asking for. I told her we don't have that. But I am making a new blend for my employees to try. You can have a cup of that once it's done. Karen replied, "That coffee looks horrible. I'll probably get sick if I drink it, considering the primitive way you made it. Plus, those cups are tiny and won't hold nearly enough." I responded calmly, "It's just enough for a taste. In fact, this could be the coffee blend for the marketing campaign." Karen laughed right in my face and told me there was no way something a lowly kitchen worker made with my ugly pot would make it into a campaign. Despite saying that I was making it for my employees, she still didn't seem to understand who I was. I finally informed her that I was the CEO of the coffee company and didn't appreciate her comments. Karen got angry and started screaming that I was lying, that a real CEO would never be working in the kitchen. She started yelling that I was trying to poison her, and soon enough, more people were gathering in the kitchen. By killing her, she meant offering her coffee from a traditional pot, which she considered dirty. "You're a nobody," she sneered. "You should learn your place and not even speak to people like me." At that point, I wished I'd never spoken to someone like her at all. I would have been happy if this was the last Karen I ever met in my life. She kept going on about what real coffee was, referring to her overly sugary, artificial concoction that made my teeth hurt just thinking about it. Then, out of nowhere, she slapped me hard enough that I almost dropped the pot and broke it. Luckily, I caught it, but not the right way up. The pot ended up upside down, and the entire tasting batch of my new brew was now ruined, spilled all over the floor. I was beyond angry. I set the pot down carefully, stood up straight, and towered over her. "I'm the CEO," I said firmly, "and I've been shown nothing but disrespect since you walked through my doors. I don't know who you think you are, but I want you out, and I will be calling your boss to report everything." Karen shouted back, "You're lying. I want to speak to the real CEO. He'll make sure you get fired." "Where's OP?" she demanded. "I want to speak to him now." I guess people assumed I wasn't there because more employees began coming into the kitchen. As soon as they saw me, they addressed me using Mishima, my surname, pronounced Mishimiwa, for my Western friends, a title of respect that Karen clearly understood. I repeated myself. I wanted her gone and would be reporting her to her supervisor. I explained how important this new coffee brand was, how many weeks I'd spent perfecting it, and how now I'd have to start all over again, wasting precious time. She still refused to leave, so I turned my attention to my employees. I asked them directly if they felt Karen had disrespected them with the way she acted. When they confirmed it, I asked them to tell her why they thought she was being rude, which they did. I also called her boss, who agreed to come in since Karen refused to listen. "I built my company on respect for everyone," I told her. "That includes anyone who comes to work with me. They must show respect to both myself and my team. The things you said since arriving showed that they gave you respect, but you refused to give it back. If I were to hire you now, it would go against the values I built this company with." Her boss arrived and listened to everything, not believing a word of Karen's lies. He was deeply sorry and embarrassed by her behavior. He apologized not only to me but to everyone in the office for what Karen had said and done. I spoke to him, and he knew that the chance of me hiring his company was now slim to none. Still, he offered to renegotiate the contract. I'd pay far less, and he'd be the only person allowed to work on the project, no more employees who might cause problems. I thanked my employees for the support they gave me, especially during the incident with Karen. It truly made me feel that they understood the company culture I was trying to build and the reasons behind it. People like Karen would never be a part of our team. The marketing campaign worked well after that, but I made a new rule for the office. If someone unknown walks in, someone should immediately go get me. I would never want my staff to be treated the way Karen treated them again. And speaking of strange situations, the next story is an incredible Am I the A-hole? Submission titled, Are we the A-holes for replacing stolen chocolate with laxatives? Also, if you've watched until here, thank you so much. Please drop some star emojis in the comments, it helps me tremendously. My wife works as a senior financial analyst at a large corporation downtown. She's been there about 5 years and, overall, really enjoys her job. The office has a pretty positive vibe, and she gets along well with most of her coworkers. One thing you should know about my wife is that she's absolutely obsessed with chocolate, especially Godiva. And I don't mean the regular drugstore stuff. We're talking about the premium kind that costs around $50 per box. She keeps a small stash in her desk drawer to help her power through those especially stressful days. About 3 months ago, she started noticing something strange. Every few days, 1 or 2 pieces would go missing from her drawer. At first, she thought maybe she was just grabbing them absent-mindedly and forgetting about it. You know how that goes sometimes. You reach for a piece without even thinking. By the way, guys, if you're reading this, drop a comment and let me know what your favorite chocolate is. But fair warning, I won't accept Hershey's as an answer. Hershey's is just bad. I will die on this hill, by the way. Anyway, after a while, she started keeping track more carefully. That's when she realized for sure someone was stealing her chocolate. She came home one evening clearly upset. I just don't get it, she said. Everyone on my team makes good money. Why would they steal my chocolate? I suggested maybe it was a misunderstanding. Perhaps someone thought they were communal snacks. But she shook her head. No way. They're in my desk drawer, not in the break room. Someone is deliberately going through my personal space. She tried several ways to address it. First, she sent a general email to her team asking if anyone had been taking chocolate from her desk, and offered that they could just ask if they wanted some. No response. Then she left a note in her drawer saying these were her personal chocolates and asked people not to take them without permission. Still, the thefts continued. Eventually, she went to HR. But like most HR departments in big companies, they gave her the standard reply, "We'll look into it." And of course, nothing changed. The most frustrating part? The thefts seemed to happen during off hours when fewer people were around. That made it almost impossible to catch the culprit. After a particularly bad week where half a box disappeared, she came home fuming. That's it. I've had enough. These aren't just any chocolates, they're my special treat. I buy them with my own money. Someone is literally stealing from me. That's when she got the idea. She'd noticed that chocolate laxatives looked almost identical to her Godiva chocolates. Her plan was simple: replace the remaining chocolates with laxative squares and wait. I was hesitant at first. Are you sure about this? What if someone has a bad reaction? These are over-the-counter laxatives, she replied. Unless someone's dumb enough to eat multiple pieces of stolen chocolate, they'll just have an uncomfortable trip to the bathroom. Maybe that'll teach them not to steal. I still had doubts, but I could see how frustrated she was. The constant invasion of her personal space and property was really getting to her. Plus, we'd already spent hundreds replacing stolen chocolate over the past few months. So we went ahead with the plan. She carefully wrapped each laxative square in gold foil to match the real chocolates and placed them back in her drawer. Then we waited. The very next day, she noticed 3 pieces missing. But she also noticed something else. One of the overnight cleaning staff, who usually spends about an hour on their floor, took an unusually long time in the bathroom during their shift. The security guard even mentioned it to her the next morning when she arrived early. Yeah, poor guy was in there for almost 45 minutes, he said. Came out looking pretty rough. Over the next few days, no more chocolates went missing. My wife replaced the laxatives with real ones again, and surprisingly, those weren't touched either. It seemed like the thief had learned their lesson. But word somehow got around the office about what she'd done. Most of her coworkers thought it was hilarious. A few, though, said it was inappropriate and potentially dangerous. One colleague even suggested she could get in trouble for booby-trapping her desk. This morning, she got called into HR. Apparently, one of the cleaning staff had filed a complaint about getting sick from poisoned chocolate. They didn't admit to stealing them, but claimed they found them and then got ill. HR gave her a verbal warning about creating a hostile work environment and hinted that she could face disciplinary action if anything similar happened again. My wife stood her ground during the meeting. "So let me get this straight," she said. "Someone admitted to taking items from my personal desk drawer without permission, and I'm the one getting warned?" The HR reps squirmed a bit, but held their line. Two wrongs don't make a right. When she told me about the meeting, I started wondering if we'd gone too far. Yes, stealing is wrong, but was using laxatives really an appropriate response? On one hand, the thief definitely learned their lesson, and the chocolates have stayed untouched since then. On the other hand, I can't ignore the potential consequences. My wife argues that she never forced anyone to steal or eat the laxatives. They did that to themselves, she says. She also points out that there's no proof she did anything wrong. She could easily argue that she keeps chocolate laxatives for personal use and keeps them in her desk, like many people do. But I can see how others might view it as an overly harsh response to a relatively minor theft. The whole situation has created some tension in the office. Some colleagues now jokingly call her the chocolate defender and ask her to guard their snacks too. Others have started giving her the cold shoulder. I'm honestly torn. On one hand, I believe people who steal should face consequences. The thief was repeatedly violating my wife's personal space and property, and nothing else had stopped them. On the other hand, causing someone physical discomfort, even temporarily, feels a bit extreme. So Reddit, am I the **** hole? Should we have handled this differently? And hey, guys, let me know in the comments what you think. Do you think Opie and his wife were the a-holes here, or did they do the right thing? So there was this neighbor, real sneaky guy, who tried to steal land from my family without us even realizing it at first. Now, I'll be the first to admit that I'm not great with measurements, and I know a lot of people are the same way. Our property is about the size of a football field, so I'm going to use that as an analogy to help explain parts of this story. These neighbors, will just say they were kind of trashy folks. My family never really wanted much to do with them. Growing up, I was told not to play with their kids because every time someone did, things always ended badly. We're talking about the kind of kids who, at 7 years old, would get handed a BB gun with no instructions and told to just have fun. And as you can imagine, that didn't end well. The oldest son inherited their property about 8 years ago. For a little while, he seemed like he might have matured into a responsible adult. But that didn't last long. His true colors came out soon enough. He kept trying to mess with our family and our land, constantly telling us we were doing everything wrong and that we were wasting the space. That part was kind of true. We had a large piece of land, but only used a small percentage of it for profitable things. We just didn't have the drive to expand, especially with my dad getting older. We didn't realize it at the time, but the neighbor had started slowly moving onto our property. When he built a new shed, we had no idea it was actually on our side of the boundary line. He started planting things on our land, too. It was such a slow, gradual process that we were practically blind to what was happening. If he had stopped then, he probably would have gotten away with stealing a good chunk of our land. But no, he had that classic God complex. He got greedy. There were some trees on our property that we knew for sure belonged to us. They were planted near what I'd call the 30-yard line of the football field analogy. One day, we heard noise and saw a bunch of sawdust in the air. We went over and saw workers tearing down all of our trees. I ran over and shouted, "Whoa, whoa, stop. What are you doing to our trees?" One of the workers replied, "Your neighbor hired us to tear them down. He said it was his property." I said, "Well, it's not. So you need to stop right now before you destroy anything else. Did you even check a map before chopping everything down?" I know he wasn't the one behind the scheme, but I was furious, and he was the one actively doing the damage. Before I could cool off, the neighbor himself showed up and started yelling at me to stop harassing his workers, or he'd call the police on me. Yeah, right. I turned around and called the police on him, because I knew those trees were ours. When the officers arrived, they looked at the paperwork the neighbor presented, clearly fake, and told me I'd need to go to court to settle it. Well, guess what? I got a lawyer and prepared to sue him for everything I could. It might sound dramatic, but those trees meant a lot to me. My siblings and I had grown up playing under them, laughing with our parents. It was more than just wood and leaves. Seeing them torn down by someone who didn't even own the land was heartbreaking. I hired a professional surveyor to get an official property assessment so I could fight this in court. That's when I found out just how long this had been going on. The neighbor had been inching his way onto our land for years. Since my dad couldn't handle the legal battle, I was allowed to act as the stand-in for the landowner. The neighbor showed up confidently, way too confident. I've learned one thing about egos. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. In court, we both presented our assessments. Mine was valid, complete with documentation. His? No paperwork, no signatures, and he couldn't even remember the name of the supposed surveyor who did it. The judge immediately ruled in my favor. I asked for $200,000 in compensation, the estimated value of the trees he destroyed. Plus, we wanted all of his structures removed from our property. The neighbor argued, there's no way those trees are worth that much. He's just trying to get rich off of me. The judge responded, you were aware this wasn't your land when you started building and cutting down trees. Neighbor's excuse? They weren't using the land anyway. I made something out of it that should cover the cost of the trees. Just because we weren't actively farming or developing the land doesn't mean it wasn't ours. We hadn't sold any of it. Nobody had permission to touch it. The court granted us everything we asked for, the full $200,000 and the removal of his structures. Though the criminal charges against him wouldn't land him in jail, he still faced consequences. He had to sell off a portion of his land to pay me. Yep, instead of expanding his property, he ended up shrinking it. I made sure to build a fence along the property line so he wouldn't try anything again. It was a long, frustrating mess, but justice was served. I still wish he'd done some jail time just so I wouldn't have to deal with him anymore. I'm sure his family gave him hell for losing part of the land, too.